in this group of the World Cup finals. I'd say the biggest day in Irish international soccer history. The Giant Stadium is full to capacity, plenty of Irish in evidence, and obviously here to enjoy a great day out. Easy, onto it comes home. Out with a shot. It's Italy 0, Ireland 1. That's away by Costa Corta. Donadoni Roberto to Donadoni.
I remember being in my aunt's house. She lived in Downpatrick, which isn't too far from here, about 8 or 9 miles. On a Sunday morning, I was upstairs in her house in bed sleeping and being wakened out of my sleep to come into the room to Tony, to my brother, and we were told together. I always remember my 2 uncles were there wearing a coat that a man would wear to a funeral. A big long top heavy coat. I remember thinking, first of all, why are they here and why are they wearing a big top heavy coat? You know, it was June. It was the summer. Why are they wearing big coats? And I just remember Mummy saying to us that bad men had come into the pub and they had guns and they'd shot 6 people and Daddy was dead. He had died. Nobody that I had known had ever died before, so I didn't really know what was happening.
We just came home from Spain. We'd been on holiday, and my husband came down here to watch the match. So I came down to join him about 10:10, and when I came down, I met a local man at the door and he said, "Don't go in there, there's been a shooting." And for some reason I thought, there's a few boys around here who went out and shot rabbits or whatever, and I thought, somebody's been in there with a gun and it's went off accidentally. And he said, no, don't go in. It's terrible, we need a clergyman. So I did come in, and what greeted me will haunt me to the day I die. Bodies just lying everywhere. The smell, the smoke was lingering, broken glass. I couldn't see it, I had to walk away, I had to run out, I couldn't.
Good evening to you, all and all. good luck to you, I say. I just come here to sing to you before I go away.
Barney was a well-known character, with his pipe and his wee rosy cheeks. He was jovial.
The night the massacre happened, where were you? What were you doing?
Some of the things I can remember, but a lot of it blurs. It was such... it was horrendous. The parish priest arrived up, and we knew then that Barney definitely was dead.
I was left in charge that day. I was only barman there, so I was 15 in, so it's a nice wee crowd, just a nice crowd. All watching the match. Hoping that Ireland was going to win. After the goal was scored, just about 5 minutes after, the door opened and all I heard was cracks. It's a gunfire. I ran up the bar and ran into the store.
Did you see anything?
No. Just heard the cracks of the gun and run up the bar and just to get away from it. I knew something was happening. There were 6 innocent men. Couldn't handpicked any more innocent. I was hitting the kidneys, so I was shot in the kidney. I was spent a week in the hospital. I was one of the lucky ones, if you can call it lucky.
For 20 years on, or near 20 years on, you put the head in the pillow at night and you reminisce about things. Never goes away. You were living, and these critters were dead. Why this place? That's what we would love to know. You'd have never doubted anybody around here. Protestant, Catholic, drunk in this bar. You know, neighbours around here had no problems whatsoever. To come to this community was unreal. It's as simple as that.
The Troubles were something that happened in Belfast. Yes, we were aware of them and we were aware of all the atrocities and, you know, people losing their lives, but it was something that never touched us, and we never, ever, for 1 minute, thought that we would ever have to live through that.
Brutal, inhuman, barbaric, callous slaughter. Some of the words used today to describe last night's atrocity by loyalist terrorists in a pub in County Down. O'Toole's Bar lies some half a mile off the main Belfast to Newcastle road at Loughin Island. It's a comparatively small bar in an isolated rural area. Slaughter in Loughin Island as the UVF shoot 11 people in the back as they watch the World Cup on television. 6 men are dead.
The gunmen from the outlawed loyalist group, the Ulster Volunteer Force, walked into the Heights bar and sprayed it with gunfire from automatic assault rifles. The attack was over in seconds.
All 6 men who died were Catholics. The eldest, Barney Green, was 87. His nephew, Dan McCreena, who was 59, perished with him. The other victims were father of 4, Eamon Byrne, father of 3, Malcolm Jenkinson, father of 2, Adrian Rogan, and single man Patrick O'Hare.
The bodies are piled on top of each other. It's just beneath contempt the people who could carry out this type of thing.
just a nightmare after that. Then it was the whole process of grieving and the funeral.
Protestants and Catholics walked together as the hearse carrying Adrian Rogan, the first victim to be buried, passed the Heights pub in Loughin Island, where the 6 men were murdered.
It was a very innocent way of spending a few hours in the company of friends, arguing over the progress of the game, delighted in the goal.
I remember walking behind the funeral and my granny had me by the hand. Loughin Island, it's a close-knit community. I just remember being, I suppose when you're small and child, it was like thousands of people everywhere.
To those who have done this, those who have killed these people, my message to them is this. I suppose some of you have families. Let's just picture a future conversation that you may have with your daughter, who asks you what you did in your so-called war, Daddy. And you will say, I killed a man of 87. He was sitting with his back to me. He was watching the World Cup. I shot him dead. She won't think that the record of a hero, will she? Now, I want to say this at the end. You are going to be caught sooner or later, the RUC. Never give up. And you will be caught and you will spend long years in prison. Thank you very much.
I got a letter from the Queen, a letter from the Pope. This made world news.
Former football great O.J. Simpson and his lawyers are preparing for tomorrow's arraignment on double murder charges. Meanwhile, police in Northern Ireland are hunting for 2 gunmen after the worst violence there in months. The men killed 6 people while they were watching Ireland's World Cup soccer match.
I thought the police can't let this go. I mean, the eyes of the world are on them. They have to be seen to be doing the right thing here. I can remember distinctly the policemen coming into the wake. A few of them actually would have known my husband. I'll never forget their words. We will leave no stone unturned till we get the perpetrators of this. And those words ring in my ear to this day because I don't think they ever lifted a stone, never mind turned it.
More than 20 years after the massacre, the Heights Bar is still in business. The bar's been rebuilt, but Aidan O'Toole, the man shot in the kidney, still pours Guinness for local farmers. I first came here to do a short film about the World Cup match, but I was haunted by the story of the unsolved murder. Why this pub? Why this village? What was at the heart of the mystery the victims' families were trying to solve? I was moved by their search, even as I knew they weren't alone. For nearly 50 years, Northern Ireland has been haunted by what is known simply as the Troubles. It's fair to say that the origin of the Troubles was in 1922, the year Ireland declared its independence from Great Britain. As part of that agreement, Ireland was divided into 2 parts, the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, a province that remained a part of the United Kingdom. By the late 1960s, Northern Ireland was tearing apart. An embattled Catholic minority, victims of legal and economic discrimination, sought civil rights and unification with the Republic of Ireland. Against them stood the mostly Protestant majority called Loyalists, who wanted to remain a part of the United Kingdom. Over time, both sides descended into terrorist campaigns, killing thousands of innocent civilians. For Republicans, the dominant force was the IRA. For Loyalists, there were a number of groups, including the UVF, which would take responsibility for Loughin Island.
We can never accept any form of United Ireland unless the majority of the people accept it.
UVF, when the Troubles started, 1968, when there was rioting and houses being burnt in the Shankill Road, they came to the fore as a sort of protector of the Protestants. The heartland would have been the Shankill Road, East Belfast, North Belfast, Portadown. That would have been more or less the centres with the UVF. And they got engaged in sectarian murders. So they would have went out and killed Catholics. The famous Shankill butchers were UVF. They went out and picked up innocent Catholics walking home at night and cut their throats, tortured them and killed them. They talk about soldiers in the Ulster Volunteer Force. They weren't soldiers. They were people who went out and murdered innocent people.
You were involved in paramilitary activities going back to the 80s, and you were in prison. What were you in prison for?
I was in prison for being a UVF activist and being involved in murders. Well, I come from a neighbourhood which is known as the Shankill in Belfast. And I suppose its historical significance, and the best way to describe it, is that it was a pro-British community. Quite a lot of people, when I was growing up, joined the British Army and went off and fought in conflicts all around the world. So there were strong links with England and with the royal family. The majority of them would have been Protestant, but there were Catholics lived in my neighbourhood as well. IRA violence at the time, they were in the Shankill where I lived. I'd watched pensioners, I'd watched an 18-month-old baby being blown out of a pram by an indiscriminate bomb. People were being murdered on the street.
The IRA, at the start, they were just a bunch of killers. Really, it was a bloodlust. They generally went after soldiers and police, but they did carry out sectarian murders as well. Usually tit for tat. If a Protestant was shot dead one night, then the Catholic was shot dead the next, and it just went back and forward and back and forward. Sadly, there was people queuing up on both sides to join, to be gunmen. Young kids were coming along and looking at these people walking down the street, these big fellas who thought they were the bee's knees. I want to be like him. So there was no shortage of people willing to pull a trigger. For a while, I was working in the intelligence world, particularly in relation to loyalist terrorism. Earlier on, I served in West Belfast, which was probably the most dangerous place in the province. Murders occurred every day, every other day. I suppose it's nearly like an adrenaline buzz, that you were out every day not knowing what was going to happen.
So exactly why did you decide to join the police, the RUC?
I suppose it was because it was a job for life.
But wasn't there a bit of risk at that time in terms of being in the RUC?
That's why I'm smiling. It's a job for life if you live long enough. There was an element of risk, yeah, there was a risk. At that time, I had a personal protection weapon. I also had a shotgun, which was kept beside the bed. I taught my wife how to fire them both. Gave her the strategy that the shotgun would be shot down the stairs, and if it came to the handgun, we went in tow.
So far as the attacks on the RUC are concerned, the IRA seem to be justifying those in advance by its allegation yesterday that the police were torturing suspects.
To stop the escalating violence, the British government deployed the army. The IRA viewed that as an invasion, and the soldiers as occupying forces. They also believed that members of the military were collaborating with loyalist gangs by offering access to intelligence and weapons.
I arrived in Northern Ireland as a young newspaper reporter in 1974. I was based in Belfast for 3 years when something like 600 people died. In those days, the army was in the lead role in security. Police were in support of the army, not the other way around. So it was a quintessential insurgency. It was really a civil war. It was a civil war.
The army are up here in the middle of Leonardoon Avenue. They'd come together
After an earlier confrontation down the end, the bus station was crowded when a bomb went off without warning.
It is a tragic, dangerous and absurd corner of the United Kingdom.
The violence went on throughout the late 80s and into the early 1990s. The IRA had developed its bomb-making capabilities, had developed its sniper attacks, and was very much now fighting an urban war against the British Army, the police and the Loyalist paramilitaries. People were just being killed by Republicans, by Loyalists. Things were completely out of control. The Loughlin Island massacre was just something that always stuck with me. There have been hundreds of fatalities and massacres on all sides, but for some reason there were so many unanswered questions with Loughlin Island. It just never went away. It was always there in the back of the head. I remember where I was on the night of the massacre. The Republic of Ireland football team were playing Italy in the 1994 World Cup.
I'd say the biggest day in Irish international soccer history.
There was a reason everyone in the Heights bar was huddled around the TV the night of the massacre. There was a symbolic backdrop to the World Cup match at Giant Stadium in New Jersey. Ireland, for once, had a world-class team that seemed to unify the war-torn island.
One image I'd always remember is going out to the Meadowlands the day of the game and seeing these cars from everywhere. Alabama, New Mexico, Minnesota, California, all with Irish flags on them, and realizing, you know what, guys, this is a home game for Ireland.
When we walked into the stadium and you walked in and you looked out, I just saw the sea of green. And so you had this din, you had this Irish singing, you had this party going on, the people, dancing in the stands, it was just this huge expression of Irishness.
There was a sense of larger meaning to the game, wasn't there? A sense that the Troubles might be ending?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, you were always aware of the fact that the sporting arena was one that reflected the broader Ireland, particularly in Northern Ireland. The game was poised at this moment of true breakthrough and hope for the Irish peace process.
And away to go.
For Irish fans, the game carried a sense of moment. Only a few months before, Gerry Adams, the political negotiator for the IRA, was invited to America for unofficial peace talks without first renouncing violence.
We put to the President that a visa for Gerry Adams would have a dynamic effect on the Irish peace process. And he accepted it, despite the fact that everybody around him, including his Secretary of State, CIA, the FBI, the British government, everyone strongly opposed that Adams visa. He granted the visa to Adams, and that was a huge breakthrough.
I did believe that by giving Mr. Adams this visa, this limited visa to come here, that we might have a constructive role in pushing the peace process.
You lean on the Irish Republican Army to drop their arms.
There are a number of armed factions in my country. The largest one is the British Army. Their allies in the Loyalist death squads, and then the Irish Republican Army. And I want to see an end to all armed factions.
Seeing Adams treated as a statesman was infuriating to Loyalists and the British government. They saw Adams as a terrorist, and the American negotiators as coddling a man who had blood on his hands. Was the attack on the bar that night a way of lashing out at the peace to come? The killers had to be thinking about the game and the hope it offered for the people in the bar.
I remember from nowhere this ball dropping into the midfield for Ray Houghton. He sees the opportunity and he lets fly. I was thinking, this can't last. But as the game went on, the Republic grew in strength and the Italians didn't fancy it.
History has been made in the Giant Stadium. The Republic of Ireland have beaten Italy.
At the end of it, to have defeated Italy, this place went absolutely mad.
We'd gone down into the press centre and I rang the office to speak to the deputy editor, and I said, "This is brilliant, Jim. I mean, it's got to be page 1 tomorrow." And he said, "It won't be page 1 tomorrow." And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "We've had an atrocity here."
The getaway car was discovered the morning after the attack by a local farmer who noticed the car in his field, 7 miles from the scene of the attack. At that time, the usual practice for paramilitaries carrying out such an attack, they would burn the car to destroy forensic evidence. Unusually, in the Loughlin Island attack, the car was left fully intact.
I'll be honest, I thought it was fantastic. We're going to be able to work on something from the car. You had hair samples, you had fingerprints. You know, there'd been a lot of, and even in those days, it'd be a forensic gift, gold mine.
Within 6 weeks, it was August the 4th, 1994, the VZ-58 rifle, which had been used to kill everyone, was found in a field not far away from where the car was found. Nearby, a holdall was found containing gloves, handguns, balaclavas. There was a hair follicle found in one of the balaclavas. So there was a wealth of forensic possibilities. There was a series of arrests in July and August of that year, and there was an expectation, certainly the families hoped, that this was all leading to people being charged, the people who had carried out the atrocities being charged and being brought to justice.
Yeah, at the time we thought that they were doing a good job. We were led to believe that they were doing a brilliant job, and the rest was only imminent. It was only a matter of time before there was convictions.
Good evening. 6 weeks after the IRA said its campaign of violence was over, loyalist terrorists in Northern Ireland have also declared a ceasefire.
Within 6 weeks of the Loughlin Island massacre, the IRA and loyalist ceasefires were called. So the whole world attention was on this new future that Northern Ireland was facing, this new sense of hope. Like other atrocities, Loughlin Island became something that you didn't talk about because nobody wanted to reopen the past. The only people who remembered Loughlin Island was the families and the loved ones.
Time went on, and we chose to stay quiet because that was our nature, that was the nature of this community, just get on with your life. So we waited, and you know, we were drip-fed bits of information about people, suspects having been arrested, and we kept thinking, right, this is it now. And then after about, I would say, a year, 2 years, it just stopped. There was no contact. And again, we chose just to stay quiet and hope that someday somebody would be brought to justice.
I think I, deserve the truth to know what happened. Like, my daddy was only 34, that's not much older than what I am now. Like, he was young, to me he was old. You know, he had a moustache and he was my daddy, he was old, I was 8, he was not an old man, but like, and he was 34 years of age. If I I don't stand up for him and I don't fight my daddy's corner, who else is going to do it? I want somebody to be held accountable for what happened here.
They've probably been the least vociferous victims of the Troubles. Relatives of the 6 men murdered by the UVF at Loughin Island 12 years ago this Sunday have never spoken publicly about the ordeal, their grief, or the lack of progress in the police hunt for the killers. But today the families gathered in Belfast to demand answers.
10 years with no information, no liaison with the families. We were kept in the dark.
After the 10th anniversary, we got together and decided we'd try and get some push on for it. Brought our solicitors and Niall Murphy.
I can think of no reasonable reason why any reasonable police officer... From the very first consultation with the families, there was just a sense that something wasn't right. All they ever wanted to know was what happened. By the end of 2005, we had 3 meetings with senior police officers. The police were saying, we have the boiler suits, we have the balaclavas, we have the weapons, we had the car. And I thought, had the car? Where is the car? Why not you have the car? Where's the car? So just, where is the car? Oh, well, you know, the car was destroyed, and but be sure that all forensic opportunities were realised from the car. Hold on, you destroyed the car? The largest physical exhibit in the case, and you've destroyed it?
The car wasn't the only thing that disappeared. All the transcripts of the initial interviews with suspects were also destroyed. More than 10 years on, even as the police kept the case open, more and more doorways to the truth were closing.
To be honest, we had always been suspicious. And on reflection, sometimes I kind of feel a bit guilty that we didn't speak up, because it seems now that we were almost... That's what they wanted us to do. They wanted us to stay quiet and this would go away.
Every question we asked, we were told, oh, we can't tell you that now, you have to put it in writing. No, we can't tell you that, that's national security. We were thwarted all the time.
I have no idea why the car was destroyed, but the fact that it was destroyed.
One of the things I do remember was 5 o'clock in the morning after the massacre. My husband, he went out and cut the grass. It seems strange now, but people were coming and going, and there was 3 policemen standing out, and there was a neighbour came down, rolled down the window of the car, and he says, "You need look no further than those there." He said that. That was his immediate reaction. You need look no further than them. Beep, there.
Somebody came in here and murdered 6 innocent people. They were just left on the floor to die. And it's not even that they didn't do anything about it. Somebody somewhere helped these people cover this up, helped them get away with it.
We want to know, how high does this collusion go? There were 6 innocent men, my daddy, and I want the truth. And I want to know why it happened, who allowed it to happen, and there are questions that we need answers to.
Last week, the police who've been conducting a new investigation into Loughin Island arrested a man and a woman, but they were quickly released without charge. The Police Ombudsman's Office have confirmed that they have received a complaint from families in Loughin Island, and they say they're carrying out an investigation.
After the ceasefire, Northern Ireland established the Office of the Police Ombudsman as a way of trying to reckon with the past. Its mission was not to solve crimes. It was to look into police misconduct, including collusion, a catch-all name for corrupt relationships between police, informants, and terrorist gangs.
Collusion first emerges in the mid to late 80s, where Republicans allege that there was collusion between the police, between members of the British Army and loyalist paramilitaries in the murder of nationalists.
Collusion was a feature throughout 30 years of conflict, and the official line was that any policeman or British soldier that was involved with loyalist paramilitaries was a bad apple.
You know, to a lot of police officers, collusion is quite a toxic word because it's capable of a very broad meaning, okay? And it doesn't easily fit into a sort of criminal code. I mean, collusion is a sense in which people are giving nudges and winks and nods.
There is no criminal offence of collusion. However, if you were concerned that the police were either involved in killing your loved one or were involved in colluding with those that killed your loved one, the Police Ombudsman's Office had a responsibility to investigate your complaint.
In 2011, the Ombudsman Al Hutchinson released the first report on Loughlin Island. Hutchinson's report detailed some staggering facts about the case. Some evidence was destroyed. DNA links to the weapons were mishandled, and a police informant had been involved in the sale of the getaway car.
That was the first time that those facts were presented in an evidence-based fashion. However, the one word that would not appear in that report was collusion. Al Hutchinson performed factual gymnastics to avoid that conclusion.
We were really, really disappointed in that. And angry. Very, very angry. At one stage, I would have loved to put my 2 hands around his neck.
I can remember at the press conference that day, there was one guy, he's a local fella here, and he did say, there's 2 words missing from this report, special and branch.
Special Branch is the intelligence unit in the police, charged with watching terrorists and handling informants. There were questions about what they knew and when, and whether they were keeping that information to themselves or whether it was scrubbed from the Hutchinson report.
It almost appeared that that report began with its conclusions and cut the pieces of the jigsaw to make it fit.
Last year, the then police ombudsman, Al Hutchinson, published a report which criticised the police inquiry but found insufficient evidence of collusion. The families strongly disagreed with that conclusion and started a lawsuit to have the Ombudsman's findings overturned. This morning at the High Court, the current Ombudsman, Michael Maguire, agreed that last year's report should be quashed.
We're delighted, we're vindicated. Mr Maguire can now go back and start again and hopefully come out with a report that gives us truth and justice.
So the way is now open for the police ombudsman to start a new investigation.
It's now been more than 18 years since the massacre at this bar. In that time, 16 people have been arrested, but no one's ever been charged with the murders.
The families, though, hope that today's development will be a step towards finding the truth. Chris Page, BBC Newsline, Loughlin Island.
Loughlin Island case was one of the iconic cases in the history of Northern Ireland, the history of the Troubles. It was one of the cases that arrived on my desk shortly after I was appointed in 2012. What happened with the first report was that it was very specifically focused on the attack on the Heights Bar on the 18th of June. So it looked at the investigative steps that were undertaken at the time of the incident, the crime scene management, and then subsequent steps. There were significant areas which had not been investigated, and that included the incidents leading up to Loughlin Island. It was important to broaden the investigation and effectively go back to the start.
In 2013, Michael Maguire and his team started a new investigation into Loughlin Island. Like Hutchinson, Maguire decided not to reveal names of sources or suspects. Police officers were identified by numbers, possible suspects by letters. Unlike the first report, Maguire's investigation looked much deeper into the case and what led up to the killing. The report confirmed that the UVF, a Protestant paramilitary group, was responsible for the Loughlin Island attack. But the investigation disproved the UVF claim that there had been an IRA meeting in the bar. It had been a tit-for-tat killing. 3 days earlier, an IRA splinter group had shot dead 3 UVF leaders standing at a bus stop on the Shankill Road in Belfast. The UVF called for revenge, with orders for members to kill Catholics, any Catholics.
People knew that there would be some kind of retaliation. That it always happened like this: when one side attacked the other, there would be retaliation.
The initial police response to the attack on the night was, given the chaos and the terror that was surrounding the aftermath of that event, was as good as could have been expected. They did seal off the crime scene. They put out vehicle checkpoints. They put up a helicopter. We checked the flying time for that helicopter, and it was reasonable in terms of the amount of time it was in the air. So the initial response of the police to that attack to us seemed to be not an unreasonable response. However, there were more serious fundamental investigative problems which came up pretty quickly.
In Dr. Maguire's report, Police Officer 4, he was the senior investigating officer on the night of Loughlin Island. He actually visited the scene of the attack. There was a meeting that night of all the senior detectives. But then within 24 hours, at most 48 hours, he went on holidays for, I think it was a month to 6 weeks. The biggest mass murder in the region. I would have thought that, that would have been one of his main priorities. But the first thing on the agenda was his holidays. It wasn't 6 people are lying dead in a bar there.
The following day, the 19th of June 1994, the vehicle is found abandoned in a field. There's some mechanical issue happened with that vehicle, and it appears to have been pushed off the road. And from there, the gunman, and I include driver in that description, but the gunman, the 3 people, and we have witnesses, and we've seen witness statements that describe 3 people. So we're saying the 3 people, a driver and 2, have made good their escape, probably on foot. What is utterly frustrating is the poor investigative practice conducted by the police. There was no forensic examination of the field afterwards, and I know sometimes it sounds as though what you're going to do with the field, but actually the potential to harvest evidence from a field is very good. The relevance of things like botany, vegetation, soil typing. If you can take soil samples from somebody's shoes or clothing, what you can do is potentially connect somebody to the field. If you can connect them to the field, you may be able to connect them to the car. It's a rolling process, but if you don't conduct that and you don't gather it in the first instance, you lose the opportunity to do that. The car itself, it had been allegedly sold the day before the crime by a gentleman in Belfast. A call went out to see the last registered keeper of that vehicle, somebody in Belfast, and an officer was tasked to go investigate that.
So I was briefed to go down to Belfast and interview several people. Most importantly, the person who sold the car shortly before the shooting took place, because obviously that's going to be the link to whoever's doing the shooting. Now, it wasn't unusual when you go to a different area to go to the local police and the local links. They'd have the local knowledge, they'd know the personalities, they'd maybe have a relationship with some form of working relationship with those personalities as well. What was unusual on this occasion is that I went down, I was told who I could speak to, who I couldn't speak to, and the people that I spoke to, what they would be saying, but just as importantly, what they wouldn't be saying.
In retrospect, do you wonder about that day in terms of what you were being told?
Looking back, it certainly at that time, I felt the word I used is orchestrated. The interviews were orchestrated, the statements that I would be taking was orchestrated, the meeting was orchestrated. I never got speaking to the man that, if I was in overall charge of the investigation, who I would want to be speaking to. But everybody was happy with that. So obviously there was things going on above my head that other people were looking after.
Later on in that day, special branch officers met with the senior investigating officer and senior members of the investigation team and verbally articulated those persons they believed would be responsible for the Locken Island atrocity. We're talking about the following day. The attack is at 10, for argument's sake, 10 o'clock on the 18th, and we're talking about during the course of the day on the 19th. It's a matter of hours. They looked at the intelligence they'd had and said, these are the people you really want to concentrate on.
The day after the massacre, Special Branch suddenly revealed intelligence about the suspects that they had been keeping to themselves. For the past 6 years, police had been aware of men from a loyalist gang who had been implicated in a string of armed assaults and murders. In 1986 in Dundrum, they had tried to kill John O'Rourke and were likely involved in the murder of Jack Keelty. In November 1992, they tried but failed to kill Peter McCarthy at the Therafoot Inn, a place believed by the gang to be an IRA hangout, 11 miles from Locken Island. The gang returned to the Therafoot Inn 2 weeks later and killed another man named Peter McCormick. It was eerily like the murder at Locken Island. The men drove used cars from Belfast, wore balaclavas and boiler suits, and sprayed the bar with gunfire. 3 weeks later in Belfast, the same gang murdered Martin Lavery. The weapon used, a 9mm Browning, was later found in the duffel bag used in the Locken Island massacre. None of the members of the gang were ever charged for committing any of the murders.
Speaking to Special Branch officers, their intelligence effort in the early 90s, they did begin to collect intelligence around the suspects in those murders. The problem was that they didn't share that intelligence with the detectives that were investigating those murders. Slow waltz was a policy used by Special Branch, which meant that documents would be released in slow time. It's usually there to protect the source of that information. So you had this situation where investigators were dealing with a bit of the information but not knowing the bigger picture. And certainly the bigger picture in the context of Locken Island was the sense that there was this gang in operation, they were involved in serious criminality.
In McGuire's investigation, the 5 suspects were identified only by letters, persons A, M, K, I, and B. The ringleader was Person A. In 1988, Person A was a member of the British Army who lived a few doors down from a loyalist club, Clock Orange Hall, where police investigating the Keelty murder found a revolver, a submachine gun, ammunition, and an Army photo record, a montage, with images of suspected IRA members. One of them was targeted for killing by the gang. Person A's fingerprints were on the montage. He was arrested and charged, but never convicted. When Person A was released, the arresting officer remained concerned about the threat posed by Person A.
That detective was so concerned that this individual was a soldier by day and a terrorist by night, that he was so concerned that he lobbied as much as he could for him to be thrown out of the British Army.
How exactly would you characterize Person A?
I would characterise him as I would characterise them all, as ruthless. Absolutely ruthless.
A serial killer?
By definition, yes.
So within 24 hours, they had the car. Special branch were able to come down and tell the investigators the names of the suspects. However, was Person A arrested that day? Was his door kicked down his hallway? Was he trailed into a police station and asked to account for his movements? Was his house searched? No. Person A wasn't arrested in the first sweep of arrests in July 1984. In fact, Person A wasn't even arrested until almost 2 months later.
We don't know why he wasn't arrested in July, with the other individuals. His house was searched. Whether or not it was a case that he wasn't there and there was work out to locate him, I just don't know.
One of the difficulties that we found in doing our investigation was that the policy logs that you would have expected with the senior investigating officer that would write down, I have decided not to arrest this person because I want to get further information or because I want to do, something else. All of that documentation wasn't available to us. It no longer exists because of an asbestos problem with a police station. They destroyed a lot of documentation, including interview notes of potential suspects.
I've got a vehicle recovered. I've got the potential of forensic harvesting. If I can hit somebody early enough and there's a weak one amongst this team, they might start tumbling.
How come they didn't do it?
Good question. I don't know. And I don't know because the senior investigating officer has not spoken to me.
One key policeman in charge of the investigation of Loughlin Island had retired, which meant he could refuse to cooperate with Maguire. That left a fog of mystery over why police allowed prime suspects time to cover their tracks.
It's rotten to the core. The very fact that the SIO in the Loughlin Island case has steadfastly refused to cooperate. What does that tell you?
Something not right here. It's one thing when people lose their lives. It's one thing when there's a major atrocity and nobody's brought to book. But it becomes a completely different thing when nobody's brought to book because somebody else didn't do their job properly or somebody else covered it up.
The family suspected that the investigation might have been mismanaged on purpose, possibly to protect an informant. Throughout the Troubles, the British government used informants, called touts, to infiltrate terrorist groups and provide intelligence. Let's talk about the British government's handling of informants. Were there problems balancing the benefits of information gained with the cost of protecting dangerous sources?
Well, that's always it's a most difficult issue because right through the period of the Troubles, some people very bravely stood up and said, this is destroying our country, destroying the province. A lot of people's lives are at risk, and a lot of people very bravely provided intelligence which prevented serious outrages taking place. Now, the question then was whether they were being properly handled, whether it was accurate information, and whether they were people who could be fully trusted and were working at all times within the law.
So you have an informed who's working in an organised crime gang. At what level is that individual allowed to work at? Is he allowed to lead that organisation? Does he go to the very top of that organisation? And what dangers is that? Is he then part of planning the operations? And of course, if you don't authorise them to do it, Their fellow comrades and gang members would want to know, why is this person out? Why are they not taking part in this?
This issue was kicked around officials year after year. Everybody wrestled with how do you make something that's manifestly criminal, not criminal, and no one could do it. However much they tried, no one could fix it.
People made decisions at high levels to continue running sources who they weren't nice people. These people, you wouldn't want to walk through your door. You didn't like dealing with them. But unfortunately, they still saved lives.
It was a very shady world, but it was one that you had to accept. Very frustrating. Informants are horrible to work with. I mean, part of my job as a detective in interviewing terrorists, and even interviewing ordinary criminals, was to recruit them. And on some level, certainly on a criminal level, you'd operate informants, as any detective would. They were essential. But what's emerging is there's maybe more of it allowed to go on than should have done. And just who was running them is a different question. You had the police who would be running informants, but you also had the military who would be running informants.
The organisation that I went to prison for, the Ulster Volunteer Force, the likes of the police and other people have infiltrated them. People in British security services definitely, were recruiting people and putting them into organisations. And in some occasions when the police are doing this, they're just looking for people to give them information, not big bits of information, but then if they grow the person big enough in that organisation, then, it's more than information. It's about how do they destroy the organisations, and they do it from within. They create confusion, they give misinformation, people start to get killed.
The danger of running highly placed informants came when those agents, under the protection of the state, started killing people. One of the most famous examples was not from the UVF, but from the IRA. He was a highly placed tout responsible for the torture and murder of other touts. His name was Freddie Scappaticci, codename Steak Knife.
Scappaticci was in prison, an internee in the 1970s. Later on, he became a member of the IRA. I knew him not greatly, but I knew him, he was an acquaintance of mine. I had seen him at Republican events, funerals, etc. He was in charge of security. Part of his role was interrogating suspected IRA informers and agents. He was breaking people, getting them to admit that they were informers, and then handing them over to the IRA who killed them. And the people who were running these agents knew that another agent was involved in the assassination of agents who were actually working for the state and should have been protected by the state from that point of view.
But how is it advantageous to the state to have this guy killing all these people who are informers in the IRA?
Because my understanding is that the people who Scappaticci were interrogating were people who the IRA at a lower level suspected of being informers, so their value to the special branch or to British intelligence had run its course. And so they saw a further advantage in having their man, Steak Knife, be the person who says, that person's guilty, I have broken him under interrogation, he should be executed.
To be clear, it was the IRA that was doing the executing. But since British agents were running this system of touts, the state's moral standing could be compromised by the knowledge of crimes committed. That gave informants power over their handlers.
Freddie Scappaticci was charged. Freddie Scappaticci would say to his handler, if I'm going down, you're going down. And the handler would turn around and say to the British government, if I'm going down, number 10 Downing Street is going down as well, because you knew all along about the dirty war, but what we were asked to do and what we were doing. The paper trail will lead to 10 Downing Street, and they cannot allow that to happen.
There's a picture of Scappaticci which sort of captures just how surreal the secret world of agents had become. He's walking behind a man who was a former senior member of the IRA. Next to the coffin of his brother, Ruby Davison, who was in fact an informer. So we have Gerry Adams carrying the coffin of an informer, Scappaticci, who was an informer, and there's another informer beyond the picture who was responsible for this murder in the first place. It's sort of madness.
This is the British government involved in assassinating people. It was as if they were sitting in their parlours in Surrey or in Kent playing war games with our lives here.
Did the running and protection of so many informants, all with hidden motives, spin out of control? It was a question that haunted the Loughin Island case and the way the murder weapon made its way into the hands of the killers.
The weapon that was used in Loughin Island was a VZ-58. It's a Czech-made assault rifle. It looks like an AK-47. People recognise, and it's often called an AK-47. If that weapon was used in Loughin Island, how did it come into the province?
To trace how the weapon got into the hands of the UVF gunmen, you have to understand the story of the arms race between the Loyalist paramilitaries and the IRA. The IRA was the first to smuggle in powerful weapons from overseas. They made a deal with Gaddafi's Libya to provide them enough military ordnance for 2 infantry battalions, including machine guns, surface-to-air missiles, and Semtex explosives. The IRA brought the campaign to the British capital, London. For a number of years, the IRA exploded bombs in the city and all over England, from subway stations to financial markets. One mortar attack nearly killed the Prime Minister, John Major.
The audacity of the attack has shocked Londoners. The van evidently stopped for several minutes just outside the Ministry of Defence on Whitehall. The British Parliament is only a few hundred yards away.
The IRA had certainly come to the conclusion that a bomb in London was worth 10 bombs in Northern Ireland.
It was one of the best strategies the IRA ever had, because our opinion in Northern Ireland was that the British government believed it was an acceptable level of violence. A policeman getting killed in Northern Ireland, a young Catholic getting murdered, a Protestant getting murdered, a soldier getting murdered, didn't mean much. The English people, they really didn't care, to be honest. You take the war to England and you put them under pressure, and that's what they did with the London bombings, a few of those, and other bombings later on.
The English campaign by the IRA led to threats of escalation by the Loyalists. That raised questions about whether the British government tried hard enough to stop the Loyalists from getting bigger and better weapons.
For Loyalist paramilitaries, there was a strategic decision to do what they call return to serve. So by attacking the Catholic community and by terrorising the Catholic community, this was a way of bringing the game as they saw it to the IRA, thereby, in their view, putting pressure on the IRA to stop their campaign. And they needed weapons to be able to do that. As part of our investigation, we found a document which talked about an informant who was reporting to Special Branch in the late 1980s. He said that Loyalist paramilitaries were preparing to buy a shipment of arms from overseas.
Did the British state bring those weapons into Northern Ireland? Is that what you discovered?
No, I wouldn't go so far as to say that.
Did the state know that weapons for Loyalists were coming?
Did the state know? The state, clearly from what we've seen, the state knew that there were plans afoot to bring weapons in.
By late 1987, the British government was watching the coastal waters. Police knew that Loyalist gangs had robbed a bank to buy a cache of guns from South Africa. In late December, informants told the military and the police that the weapons were nearing Northern Ireland, hidden under floor tiles in a container ship. Then, mysteriously, the government lost track of the vessel, and the guns landed somewhere near Belfast.
It was a shipment that was large enough to equip a small army. I mean, we are talking about hundreds of automatic weapons, fragmentation grenades, rocket launchers, handguns, tens of thousands of ammunition. We know from the Ombudsman's report that after the shipment of weapons came in, they were held at the farmhouse of one James Mitchell. Mitchell's farmhouse was at the heart of what became known as the Glenanne Gang. This Glenanne Gang was comprised of members of the UVF, serving soldiers, serving police officers. From James Mitchell's farmhouse, the most appalling acts of terrorism had been plotted, going back at least to 1974. Dublin Monaghan bombs, some 33 people were killed. They were turning up, machine gunning people going into bars, posing as soldiers with their uniforms at night at checkpoints and gunning people down. They were fearsome, and they were members of the security forces.
At the farm, the weapons were waiting to be split 3 ways between 3 loyalist gangs, one of which was the UVF. On January 8, 1988, 3 cars set out from Belfast to pick up their shares. One of the cars was followed by police, who had been tipped off by a loyalist informant.
The surveillance operation lost sight of these men, and therefore were not able to track them to the location where the entirety of the arms dump was being stored. But after they left that farm, they were picked up in 2 Ford Grenadas, which were laden down with dozens of VZ-58 rifles. The suspects found driving this 2 Ford Grenadas had straw and muck and manure on their boots, so they knew that they had been to a farm-type area. And the police intelligence knew all about James Mitchell's farm, but they don't go there.
I just wonder, a farmhouse near here. Now I wonder, could that be James Mitchell's farmhouse? The notion that that didn't even occur to them is beyond belief, especially because very shortly after the arrest of those loyalists whose cars were full of guns, someone tipped off James Mitchell that the security forces might soon be coming to look at his farm. And the rest of the guns were moved very swiftly. So you've got one half of the state trying to interdict this stuff, and you've got another section within the intelligence gathering community determined to undermine that effort, and they succeed in doing so. It's an appalling story, a really appalling story.
The UVF, it ended up with a capability they didn't have before. The paintings appeared on the walls of the guy standing with the VZ-58s. Guns got away and were used in murders, over 70 murders.
At least 70 people were killed by the rifles alone. How many people were killed by the bullets and the fragmentation grenades and the rest of it, we don't know. An awful lot of people died as a result of those guns coming into Northern Ireland.
One of those weapons left the farm of Glenanne and would reach its murderous conclusion on the 18th of June 1984 in Loughin Island. There is a ballistic specific trail. The serial number of the weapon that was used in Loughin Island falls specifically in between 2 weapons that were recovered after the arms importation in January 1988.
Start, and certainly the team playing but heaving as if they were indeed among the elite, and deservedly so.
AFE camera marker.
So, about 6 months after the massacre, police had a significant breakthrough when they received an anonymous call.
From what I understand is that the call was made to a confidential reporting line maintained by the RUC, and basically basically wanted to pass information as to the potential identities of people involved in the shooting at Loughin Island, and gave names in relation to that.
And were those names the same names of the suspects?
They're all relevant names, yes. Oh yeah. And it wasn't too far later when it was followed up by written anonymous letter delivered to a local councillor that again articulated the same information and naming the same people as being involved.
But you weren't able to ascertain whether the police knew who this anonymous source was?
Yes, the police knew who the source was, yeah.
And did you know how they knew?
Alex, you're taking me into an area that I don't really want to go to because of the constraints within which I operate under. I mean, the police had information which they could have exploited. In my view, they didn't do it particularly well. I think that's all I'm prepared to say at this stage.
How exactly were the police able to identify this anonymous caller, given that it was anonymous?
I'm only taking a moment to think about some of the potential dangers in this line, and I appreciate fully where you want to go with this and how much you want to glean off it. But I also am really conscious of the potential dangers behind it. Because I can answer that, but I know what your next question is going to be, and at that point I would shut you down completely, because I'd be asking the same question, being in your shoes.
Was there any other evidence or any other information that came?
Of course, I wanted to know the name of the anonymous caller and whether it was the same person who had written the letter, but the investigators weren't talking. To protect witnesses, they were willing to tell us the plot of the story, but not the names of the characters. So the Ombudsman's investigation was a bewildering thicket of letters and numbers. Person A, Person M, Police Officer 12. Who were these people? The answer came in the form of another anonymous tip. In 2011, someone upset by the Loughin Island cover-up leaked a document to journalist Barry McCaffrey.
The leaked document came through the post. I still don't know to this day what pricked somebody's conscience to send it. Maybe it was the fact that they knew we were working on this story, and that the families weren't getting the answers or hadn't been given the answers. The document was an unpublished report carried out by the previous ombudsman into the Loughin Island atrocity. This report had preceded Al Hutchison's report. It had been dated 2008.
The leaked report was a draft, so it was unredacted. It contained real names and critical details about the case that had never been disclosed. The text of the anonymous letter was missing, but the report revealed the name of the man to whom the letter was sent, Patsy Toman, a local politician who arrived at the Heights bar just after the shooting.
There's 5 people lying dead in there. If the names that I've been given are the proper names, I know every one of them personally. People have carried out all these deeds in Northern Ireland are the scum of the earth. What is them 5 deaths tonight going to prove? What is it going to gain? A lot of people saw.
I got this letter on Valentine's Day, and I says maybe somebody sent me a Valentine card, but as I read down it, I found out that it was serious and very serious. And it seemed to be, I thought it was a lady's writing, this sort of writing. Dear Mr. Toman, I am writing to advise you of certain facts that I think would be of interest to you in your quest to cage the Loughin Island murders. When I saw you on TV, after the inquest, I felt that I had to let someone know what I was privy to. The men arrested after the murder were indeed close to the culprits. The commander of the operation. No, I'm sorry, I'm not going to read it. No, I was wrapped that after me once, they'll be after me again.
Patsy had reason to be afraid. Before the Loughin Island massacre, His house had been bombed by Loyalist terrorists. More than 20 years later, he was still afraid to read the section of the letter that named the alleged killers.
I can't take the risk. All right.
Patsy had given the original letter to the police, who then lost it. But Patsy kept a copy and was willing to share it years later with Barry McCaffrey.
The gunman was one Ronnie Hawthorne, a married man from Clock. Gunman 2 was Alan Taylor, single from Dundrum. The driver of the getaway car was Gorman McMullen, a convicted terrorist from Belfast and a leading light in the Belfast UVF. I was privy to this info because I was in the original planning of the murders. I pulled out of the attack due to a prior engagement that I couldn't cover up. The police indeed had the boys in for questioning, but as a policeman told me, we know who done it, but we can't prove it, and without proof or statements, they'll go free. Hawthorne and Taylor, they took part in the attack on the Thurifirth pub in Kilcoo a few years ago, and various other incidents in the area. This information will somehow ease my conscience, but will never fully clear my name. But I do this for the family and children of the men who were slaughtered in Loughin Island. Contributed, may we all live in peace.
It turned out that the people named as the killers in the anonymous letter were also key suspects named in the leaked report. Were these the same people that McGuire had focused on in his investigation? We looked at both documents, and by cross-referencing arrest dates, were able to break the code and put names to all the ciphers. Person I was Gorman McMullen, named by the letter as the driver. Person M was Alan Taylor, named as the man who held the door. Person A, accused of being the ringleader of the gang and the gunman, was Ronald Hawthorne. The leaked document revealed something else. The author of the anonymous letter and the person who made the anonymous phone call were one and the same. Hilary Hawthorne, the wife of Ronnie Hawthorne. We don't know what Hilary Hawthorne looks like. There are no images of her or Ronnie Hawthorne online. We found an article about Ronnie's arrest for the photo montage. We found Ronnie and Hilary's marriage certificate. They were married in a Presbyterian church in Clock, a few miles from Loughin Island, 10 years before the killing. He was 24, she was 18. Did she know then what kind of man she was marrying? We also know that Hilary was close to local police. A detective told me she had actually worked in the canteen of the Newcastle police station. That's how they recognized her voice when she made the anonymous call. Brought in for questioning, Hilary Hawthorne admitted writing the letter. Area police said she did it to punish her husband for cheating on her. What's hard to understand is why she was never charged with a crime.
She was indeed arrested, but we don't know what she said in the interviews because police fortuitously destroyed those notes, and we don't know why she wasn't charged. But the line in this letter that states, I was privy to this information because I was in the original planning of the murders, how this one person was not charged before the court with conspiracy to murder, and who knows what the author of this letter would have wanted to do in terms of perhaps even turning state's evidence. We don't know because she wasn't charged.
The question of why leads to the man who interrogated Hilary Hawthorne, Police Officer 4, Detective Inspector Albert Carroll. It turns out he was the deputy SIO in charge of Loughin Island, but left on vacation the day after the killing. He had also been involved in 3 other murder investigations regarding the Hawthorne gang. He retired in 2011. Barry McCaffrey went looking for him.
Where did you find Albert Carroll?
In a small village in France. It took a long time to convince him to even meet us. We'd met him in a little hotel. Mr. Carroll, he couldn't explain to us why he hadn't charged Hillary with conspiracy. I got the distinct impression that Mr. Carroll wanted to know more what we knew about him than what he was going to tell us about Loughlin Island.
Did you show Albert Carroll the leaked report in which he was named?
Yes.
What was his reaction when he saw how much you knew about his role?
He shit himself. Yes. He was very defensive. Yes, yeah. Yeah, he was very defensive and edgy.
Carroll was keeping secrets, but he did reveal a new detail. When Hillary was arrested, Ronnie was there. Ronnie knew about the letter and why it was written. But instead of charging Hillary or using her to get to Ronnie, Carroll let her go, with a vague promise that she would help make sure that her husband wouldn't kill in the future.
What do you suspect is the reason Hillary was never charged?
I suspect that the author of this letter wasn't charged to ensure that the police's wider intelligence agenda was not disrupted.
There was a kind of culture of picture building. The requirement for intelligence gathering was more strategic than it was to serve the criminal justice system. And the intelligence tail began to wag the dog.
That issue hung over the case. Was intelligence and protecting informants more important than solving the crime? And just before the killing, what did the police know, and when did they know it?
So, 2, maybe 3 months after the murders, on one particular night, late into the night, at past 10, 11 o'clock, I was in a country bar, which would have been about 10 or 15 miles away from Loughlin Island. And 2 detectives came in, my colleagues. They'd just been to a meeting in Armagh, which is where our senior detective, chief superintendent, would have been. And in a conversation with one of them, out of earshot of everybody else, what was told to me is that there was a phone call made at 6:30 at the evening of the shooting, and that the shooting had been called off. A phone call had been made by an informant at 6:30 saying the shooting had been called off because the car was unreliable.
We know that the killing wasn't called off. But did Special Branch know before the murder that there was a plan and that the killers were having problems with their car?
On the day of the Loughlin Island murders, person I was seen in Newcastle talking to persons A and M in Main Street. It is known that persons A, M, K and B are aware that there was a mechanical problem with the vehicle.
According to the letter, person A was Ronnie Hawthorne, the gunman. Person I was McMullen, the driver. Person M was Alan Taylor, the man who held the door.
An informer told police that the 3 of them were on Main Street in Newcastle?
Yeah. At tea time on the 18th of June 1994, a phone call was made to Frenchie's Bar, either by person A or person M, asking to speak to person B urgently.
How did Special Branch know that?
I can't tell you that. I know how they get to know that, but I can't tell you that, I'm sorry. It's perfectly legitimate how they know that.
Was there a bug on the phone?
It's not.
Was one of the people involved an informer?
All I will tell you is that we've seen intelligence that says one of the legitimate suspects in the investigation was a police informant and continued to be for some time afterwards.
And it could be more than one, or at least one.
At least one. I mean, we've specifically identified one within the suspect group that for our investigation purposes was relevant, but there certainly could be more than one within that, but we're only concerned with one.
By and large, on the ground, people wanted to solve crime and catch criminals. But in Lock Island, informants were involved, and that's where the lines become blurry. Had the event ran its course without any informant, it was just a straightforward murder that nothing could be done about, nobody knew about it. But then when something could have intervened and it doesn't, that raises a lot of questions.
Special Branch had intelligence on these individuals prior to the attack, and then the getaway car was found a short distance from the family home of Man A, Ronnie Hawthorne. But police never searched the Hawthorne's family home. It has never been searched.
Another critical piece of information we found disturbing was that individuals who were arrested in August, at the back end of August, were warned the night before that they were going to be arrested. And subsequently to that, we learned that the police then had further information that the individual who warned them had been a police officer. And that was hugely concerning.
Of the 4 suspects warned, the most significant was Person A, Ronnie Hawthorne. Prior to Lock Island, he had been charged in connection with one murder and implicated in a string of others. In the case of the massacre, he was named the day after as a likely suspect, and the getaway car was found within walking distance from his family home. Yet the police waited 2 months before Hawthorne was finally brought in for questioning.
We interviewed Hawthorne, yeah. He'd have been arrested early hours, probably 5, 6 o'clock in the morning.
Did Hawthorne himself seem to be smug in the interview? I mean, was he, pretty relaxed?
He wasn't stressed, that's for sure. In my mind, it's just a terrorist. He's just a hating bigot. Killing a Catholic to him was like wiping a shoe, a fly off his shoe. That's what he was to me. And if I'd have got in his way, I've no doubt he'd have shot me too.
Inside the police station, the interrogation was more than a little strange. The actual questioning about Lock Island only lasted for about 10 minutes.
This was a kind of a charade. It was like, I have to talk to you about something, but we're just pretending here.
We have to be here for 2 hours. Let's have a chat. Okay? We have to be here for 2 hours. Like, you killed these people. You were the gunman. No, I wasn't. Like, we're not going to get anywhere there. You're not going to admit it. That's fine. Let's have a chat.
Then the conversation turned away from interrogating Hawthorne to encouraging him to commit a murder, to kill an IRA gunman who posed a threat to the detective.
So this detective spent most of the time telling Hawthorne that if he doesn't kill this Catholic gunman soon, this Catholic gunman's going to get him. So you're telling the cat, kill the mouse before the mouse gets you, because I'm shit scared of the mouse killing me. If that makes sense.
So he was telling Hawthorne, you better get this Catholic gunman.
Because he's going to get you. But why is he doing that? Because I'm petrified that guy's coming for me. And then Hawthorne was released from Armagh Goth Barracks, probably about 6 o'clock next night. It was just disgusting. It was.
5 years later, Hawthorne was arrested again. DNA testing on the hair found in the duffel bag revealed a match to Hawthorne's family. But within a day, he was released due to insufficient evidence.
I never wanted to believe there was collusion in any of the murders I was at, but Lough Island, you'd have to say someone was being protected. And the truth is being withheld from the families. There was no drive at all to solve a murder.
Hope for the families arrived with a notice that the Ombudsman was nearing the end of his investigation. In the spring of 2016, I traveled back to Lough Island for the moment in a private meeting with the victims' families when Maguire would reveal what he had discovered.
What do you think the outcome of this will be?
Don't know. I'm really afraid to think about it.
I don't want to think about it either. It's like, it couldn't be any worse than the last one. But you can't hold out much hope.
No.
We've been let down so many times. We don't want to be getting our hopes up again.
No, but
it's hard to believe that after all this time they might eventually admit the truth.
Hopefully.
My grandchildren are now starting to ask, what happened to Granda? Did anybody go to jail? Did anybody get punished? Because children are taught from no height, if you do wrong, you'll be punished. Should you be sent to your room, or, you know, you won't get any sweets or whatever, you must learn to...
Get your PlayStation taken off.
Yeah, get your PlayStation, whatever. So, I need answers for him.
Okay, ready to go? Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Today has been the day that we've been waiting for. It's been a long journey, longer than it should have been, I think. And I'm certainly aware of people that would like to have been here but can't through the passage of time, and my sympathies to those families. Thank you for sticking with me as we inch closer to the publication of this report. I appreciate your patience, even though I recognise that at times we didn't deserve it, but I am grateful for the fact that you've worked with me while we've inched towards the publication of this document. I'm going to tell you my conclusion, and then I'm going to tell you how I arrived at that conclusion based on the information that we have received. When I looked at all the information which I will spell out this afternoon, I have no hesitation in saying that collusion was a significant element in relation to the killings in Auckland. The report is divided into three areas. The arms importation in 1987, the events prior to the attack in Auckland, and the investigation into the attack itself. To fully understand what happened in the village,
This is 22 years that these families have waited patiently, with dignity. They have campaigned ferociously. Everybody knows the pain and trauma that you have gone through. And I think that the memory of your loved ones has had dignity restored to them.
That's all we ever wanted, was somebody to tell us the truth. That's every single person in this room. All we wanted was the truth of what happened.
It's just hard to take in. There's parts of it that you have to kind of park up, because I couldn't take it all in. Sorry.
This report is one of the most damning expositions of state collusion and mass murder that has ever been published.
We have the truth today, 22 years on. Now it's time for justice and accountability.
We all deserve and demand justice from the British government, who are ultimately responsible.
Well, this was the tip of the iceberg, but there's still 2/3 of it buried below. The publication of the report, it caused ripples that it has impinged on a lot of other cases, and a lot of people hopefully will have gained a wee bit of hope that they may get answers somewhere along the line, and just keep hammering away at it.
It's 160 pages. If you remember the last report in 2011, it was 63 pages, and of substance was probably about 55. So there is an immense amount of detail in this that...
The finding of collusion was a victory for the families, but there were many details that were not revealed to them. Details that I had uncovered. The names of the alleged killers, the contents of the letter, the strange role played by the suspected gunman's wife. Then there was the question of why the police still refused to charge anyone. That was linked to the mystery that still haunted the case. Who was the informant?
Now there needs to be accountability. Dr. McGuire has more information to brief us with. So what he has told us already are the headlines, and they are. There are other incidents and murders that are referred to in the report, and I have been approached by some of those families, one of whom were the family of Martin Lavery, who was murdered on the 20th of December 1992. We know from the report that 4 people were responsible for his murder: persons A, M, K, and person I. The Lavery family quite correctly felt that there were questions that they had that they deserved answers to. Through a process of legal disclosure and a meeting with people in a position to know, Mr. Lavery's family asked quite pointedly, were any of the people involved in the murder of Martin an informant? We were told that at the time of Martin's murder, none of them were informants. However, one of those individuals was an informer at the time of the Lough-Anild atrocity.
Knowing that it was one of 4 people, I approached the source with access to the special branch files. Nervous, he wouldn't say a name, but he confirmed that one of the gang that night was working for the British state as an informant when Person A, Ronnie Hawthorne, reportedly emptied his weapon into a bar full of people watching the World Cup.
of the things we learned, it's not really in the Maguire report, is that among the gang that killed your husband, there was at least one informant. Had you heard that?
No.
Does that surprise you?
Not really. Nothing surprises me anymore. I suppose it's news to me, but it doesn't. No, nothing surprises me. I just have no idea just how absolutely rotten this whole system was.
Also making his presence felt. There's a shot.
I told the families what I had learned about the massacre that went beyond the Maguire report. The names of the suspects, and my suspicions that they were still being protected by some part of the British government. The person named as the second gunman, Alan Taylor, left Northern Ireland in the late 90s and was last seen in England. Gorman McMullen, the man named as the driver of the car, lives in Belfast, a member of H&W Welders Club. He regularly turns out for parades celebrating the UVF and pops up on social media and sex club websites. If you drive 4 miles from Loughin Island, you can find a country road scattered with lovely houses where person A, Ronnie Hawthorne, lives. He's still together with his wife, Hillary, who named him as the gunman. When calls and letters failed to get a response, we hired a private eye to see if we could find out what they looked like. This photo is the two of them at work. They own a small company that cleans offices, and for firms overrun by pests, offers extermination services.
They were local people, just up the road from us. They're still living nearby yet. It just makes it unbelievable. It bothers everybody that they're living in there. But even if they're just named and shamed, people could walk on the street and look at them and say, you murdered 6 innocent men. Then there was some closure. What happened that night just changed my whole life. So it did, playing football, quit darts, just finished everything, like. Just don't want to go out anymore. It just impacted everybody in Loughin lives, like. So it did. Just left them in a sense of fear and injustice.
It kind of makes me look over my shoulder that I could be meeting these people in the course of my work or going to the shop. I may not know what they look like, but they'll know me. And that makes me a little, if not a lot, more anxious than I'd ever been.
It's hard to understand why, more than 20 years after the crime, when so much is known about the suspects, that they can't be prosecuted. Of course, even if convicted, they would only serve 2 years. In order to bring peace to Northern Ireland, that was the deal made under the Good Friday Agreement. For every murder involved with the Troubles.
To those who have killed these people, you are going to be caught sooner or later. The RUC never give up, and you will be caught and you will spend long years in prison. Thank you very much.
The government were trying to use us as pawns to try and bring peace to Northern Ireland. Protecting informers was much more important than bringing the people to justice who carried out this atrocity.
It seems as if hands are tied. That.
What do you mean?
I think it goes higher up. I really do believe that. We believe that it goes as far up to right to the top.
Has the state got out of turning a blind eye to this murderous activity? It's very hard to come up with an answer, isn't it? It would have to be pretty damn good. I can't imagine what it might be. In fact, I'd go so far as to say the reward couldn't possibly ever match the consequence of those deaths. The reason Loughin Island is important is because it's another insight into the kind of compromises that we as a state made on moral and legal standards. Every democracy has to make those compromises. We, I think, made more compromises than a lot of us have been aware of, as more of the picture of the hidden past is revealed.
Year after year, the past is set aside to make room for the future. But for families of victims, that's hard to accept. They need to dig back and reckon with what happened and why. Surrounded by mountains of records with many of the answers, government officials decide each day what they think is good to remember and what is better to forget.